Welcome, everyone, to another fantastic episode of Double Book. Tonight, we're heading into the far edges of space with an author who has quickly become one of the most exciting voices in modern science fiction. He blends heart with high-stakes danger, with a deep humanity, and an epic world building with intimate, character-driven storytelling. You know him from Kenai. Welcome the one, the only Dave Dobson. How's it going, Dave?
It's going great, although I don't know how I'm going to live up to that intro.
My goodness, you're going to kill it, man.
Yeah.
You're going to kill it. You're going to kill it. I was gushing a little bit about Kenai before we jumped on. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Again, appreciate you sending me a copy to go through and read. For those that are not familiar with Kenai, can you go through and explain, give a little bit of an elevator pitch for your book?
Sure. Yeah, it's I got it right here. It's a sort of space opera / military sci-fi would be the genres that you might want to stick in it, or subgenres of sci-fi. The premise is that there's a former space marine who has been through some stuff in terms of her career and getting in a whole bunch of trouble. And she's starting over, kind of trying to, and she doesn't have a lot of skills other than what she learned in the military. And so the only job she can really find is working security on a xenoarchaeology dig on a planet that is extinct. There's like just ancient ruins. And the council, which is the government of the far future sort of human arrangement that I've got there, is thinking about colonizing and exploiting this planet, but they're required to do a xenoarchaeology sort of dig to establish and to protect any artifacts or relics or that kind of thing. So, but the planet's empty. All it's got is herbivores and a couple of small predators. So it should be totally easy duty, and that's the setup, is that she's there. There are a bunch of digs. She's with one guy, and they're doing a dig, just the two of them, with some nanites and robots and stuff. And so that's the book opens with them in their little camp, and she's still a little nervous because of her military training. So she's trying to make sure everything's going okay and going to be secure, even though the planet's peaceful. And then stuff starts to go wrong, and she starts to realize that what she's been told about the mission and the planet and the people in charge is not at all what she thought, and things start to spin out of control from there. So yeah, I can go farther into it, but I might start to get into some of the details that I think are sort of fun to discover.
Yeah, we'll go through and we'll talk a few things about it. Again, I'm going to try to make it spoiler free, but it goes into chaos. I've experienced it myself. You are going to experience a lot about this world. There's some amazing characters in this, a big, dense history. It's a lot of fun. We'll go through, we'll talk a little bit more about it during that section. But I do want to just take a step back, Dave, and talk a little bit about your background to writing. What got you into writing? What's your origin story?
I've been writing stories and sort of loving fantasy and sci-fi since I was a little kid. I took creative writing when I could in high school and college. I wrote in my free time up until sort of middle of grad school. And at that point, I got involved in a software company that I founded, which produced the game Snood, which some people have heard of and some people have not. But it got to be a pretty big deal. And so with running the Snood company and also kind of starting my teaching career, teaching geology at Guilford College, I fell away from doing a lot of writing. But then as my kids grew up and I could put down some of the Snood stuff, I started writing my first novel, and that was Flames Over Frosttown, which is a fantasy detective story. And I wrote that sort of on and off on vacations and summers in small pieces for about 7 years. So that was a really slow process. And, I would leave it alone for like a year at a time and come back. But I had this idea that I wanted to try to write a novel and see if I could get it, published or out there. And and so after 7 years, I got an editor and a developmental editor, and they helped me kind of figure out how to tell the story a little better and the mistakes I was making and, sort of tropes I was falling into and that kind of stuff. And that was really helpful. And it took me another 7 years to rewrite the thing and to kind of get it polished up to where I was willing to send it to agents and things. And then I eventually I got one offer to publish it from a company that hadn't done any sort of adult novels. Like this would have been a real stretch for them. And I had some family connections to that company. But I decided to go ahead and self-publish. I was used to going it on my own from the Snood company and publishing software on my own. So it seemed like a good fit. And after that, I found out that I really enjoyed both the writing and having people read my stuff. So I started writing a lot more. And I've got 10 novels out, almost 11.
Wow.
Over the time from about 2019 to now. So 1 or 2 a year.
Wow.
It didn't hurt that I stepped away from my teaching career in 2021. So this is mostly my full-time gig. So that's been a lot of fun too. I'm doing what I was doing for fun when I wasn't working now. So that's
awesome. That's awesome. 11 novels in the past 7 years. That's just crazy impressive. So you found a good cadence. You found a good routine to go through.
No, not really. But I go in sort of spurts, and sometimes I leave off a project for 9 months or a year and a half and come back to it. So I have written, like, the fastest first draft I've ever written was in a month during a NaNoWriMo, like a November sort of writing push, where I was writing 2 sessions a day and about 3,000 to 4,000 words a day. But I can seldom go that fast. It's much more common that I'll do 1,000 or 1,200 words a day, and it'll take me 3 or 4 months, often with breaks. But I'm getting smarter about how I do it, and I've figured out that if I write every day, I go faster. So I'll try to get in the zone and do a project with a lot of connected time if I can.
So what is that? How do you get in the zone? Is there do you listen to music? Do you kind of seclude yourself away from the world? Like, how do you go through and get into the zone every day?
Well, a lot of my days now that I'm not teaching are kind of wake up, go upstairs, play video games, write, go downstairs, go to bed. Like that's, that sounds pretty sad, but that is sort of focusing, and I don't have a lot of distractions other than the ones I make for myself. But yeah, I sometimes will play music. I have I love to listen to movie themes while I write. So especially like sci-fi or fantasy movies, I've got a Pandora station that'll just keep sending them my way. And I've got that seeded with a bunch of stuff I liked, and it comes up with more. So I love that kind of music because it's got a lot of emotion behind it, and it's got highs and lows, and it's usually dramatic and in service of a story that I may have, liked or watched or that kind of thing. And so that's really good vibes. I can't always do that because my wife works in the office next to me. So if I'm here, blasting Star Trek or something, then she's going to have to tell me to shut up for her meeting. But yeah, no, I like that a lot. I tend to write mostly after midnight. I've always been kind of a night owl, and I will find other stuff to do all day and then be like, no, I have to get my writing in tonight. And so I will often write between sort of midnight and 2 or 3 a.m. Again, not being gainfully employed, I can just get up at 11 and there's no big problem with that. This lifestyle was sort of waiting for me after all the years of 9 to 5 and kids. So I have completely turned into a college student now.
Living the dream. You're living the dream. You,
well,
you can say it. You're living the dream.
Well, yeah, you could do it that way, which sounds good, or you could say that I am losing all of my adult skills and falling apart. But yeah, yeah,
Oh my
but
goodness.
no, but that's fun. When I'm writing, I often will do, like I've done the NaNoWriMo every year. November, I'll just sit down and do as much as I can do of a project. And that's gotten me most of probably 6 or 7 of these books have been November projects. But other ones I do slower. One of my mysteries I wrote every day for about 11 months, not 1,000 words a day all the time, but I was just sort of constantly working on it to get that first draft. So yeah, they've all been kind of different experiences. If I really love the characters, then and the story is easy, then I can go the fastest. So one of my mysteries got trouble. The main character is a sort of 40-some-year-old woman whose husband's a total loser, and he screws something up and she has to deal with it. And I just had so much fun writing this kind of world-weary, super competent, but completely unlucky character. So that was a lot of fun. And then one of my more recent ones, Lady Isovar here, this was a blast because this is the silliest book I've written. It's about a lady knight who's completely overconfident, and all she wants to do is go out and smite enemies and imprison miscreants and pursue honor and valor. But she has no idea the consequences of all the stuff she's doing. And so she's got this sidekick, her squire, who is trying to control her and just point her in directions where she's not going to hurt anybody. And he's got stuff like he's convinced her that swearing vows is a good knightly thing to do. So he's had her swear a vow not to kill anybody on a Thursday. And so he always tells her it's Thursday, and she's too wrapped up in her own glory to actually pay attention to what day it is. So he keeps kind of saving people by
you can't do this today. It's Thursday.
Yeah,
okay.
Thursday.
All right. You're lucky it's Thursday. That is awesome. That sounds so funny. That sounds so funny.
Anyway, yeah. So that one just sort of poured out. I tend to write seat of the pants without an outline. And so I might be a far better author if I did outline and plan, but I have more fun kind of just starting a chapter without really knowing how it's going to end or what's going to happen. And I love surprising myself with what the characters say or do, or if a new character shows up in the middle, I'll be like, oh, that's cool. And kind of just go that way. So that's been my process for all of these.
Awesome. So we have a question by the one and only Mike Mullman.
Oh,
when are we gonna have an audiobook?
I would love to do that. That one's a little tricky because it alternates between Lady Isovar and her squire Chevson. They both have POV, and they alternate by chapters. So I would probably need to get 2 narrators to work together, with one person recording the Chevson chapters and one person recording the Lady Isovar ones. And so I would love to do that. I haven't, a lot of authors I think do really well with audiobooks, and mine do okay, but they never, not yet anyway, have made back my investment in them. So when I do them, it's sort of like me just deciding, well, I'm going to spend some money on this because I want to have an audiobook out, and not like this is going to make me, it's not a good investment for me yet. It's that. So, and it takes some time to kind of organize it and everything. But yeah, that's probably the next one I'll do as an audiobook. I've got about 4 of mine out on audiobook now. Kenai's on audio, and Daros, my 2 sci-fi ones. And then one of my mysteries, What Grows from the Dead. And then the first in my Inquisitors Guild series, that fantasy detective one.
Who's the narrator for Kenai?
That's the same one who did my Daros book. Why am I blanking on her name? I've worked with her so much.
Jennifer Pratt.
Jennifer Pratt. Yeah. Sorry, I'm bad with names.
No, you're good. No,
I would be halfway through a semester and be handing back papers and still not know my students' names. I can't do that somehow. My brain doesn't work that way. But yeah, Jennifer is terrific. She did Daros also, and Daros has kind of 3 main characters plus a whole bunch of other people, and so she had to come up with a million voices to do that one. Kenai's more small scale. There are probably only 5 or 8 major characters, and so she certainly is creative and great, but she had, I think, an easier time kind of doing that one. But I love her emotion and the work she puts into it. So, yeah.
All right, I need to go through and check out that audiobook, because I read it on the ebook, and so it was me mispronouncing everything under the sun.
Oh yeah.
I'd love to go through and listen to the audiobook version, but like, I actually got something right. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, well, I mean, my choice for the pronunciations isn't always right either, and people can pronounce anything. Like some people call it Kenai, and other people call it Kenai. That's a word I learned when I was doing marine geology in grad school, because the Kenai Peninsula is in Alaska. I mentioned that in the book just briefly. And so that's where I got the word. I just thought it was kind of a cool term, and imagined that some person with native Alaskan roots might name a planet Kenai after, something back on Earth. But yeah, so yeah, and Jennifer's really careful. She always wants me to say, what's the official way to say all of these words? And I'm like, I just made up the words. I don't know how to say it. So sometimes we go with
Jennifer, I trust your judgment. I trust
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, sometimes I just let her go with whatever she feels like is right. But
love it.
Yeah.
So 11 books, past 7 years. That's very impressive. I'm curious. Do you have any authors that helped influence your voice or the approach to storytelling? I've talked to authors before, and they go, these specific authors has inspired me. I've also talked to other authors, like there's more movies inspired me. But I'm curious for you, Dave, who's been your inspiration?
Yeah, let me tell you that, but let me let my cat in here because she's rattling the door.
No, you're good.
Yeah, there we go. Sorry. So the one sort of book that I try the most to emulate is Princess Bride by William Goldman. Both the book and the movie, I think, they're not exactly the same, but they're both great. And the thing that he does that's awesome is he has a whole bunch of jokes, which I love. Like I like all my books to be funny, and Kenai's one of the more serious ones I've done, but there's still funny stuff in there, I hope. But the story behind The Princess Bride is actually meaningful. Like the characters have lives and challenges and heartbreak and all of that. So for me, that's a great book. If I can make people laugh, but also kind of care about the characters and see them as real people. Not everybody in The Princess Bride is a real person, and certainly not everybody in Lady Isobar is completely realistic. But yeah, so that's kind of what I'm shooting for. In terms of other authors, I read a ton of the Conan stories, which are not funny at all, but Robert E. Howard and then L. Sprague de Camp. And I really like those sort of big, bold adventure things. Harlan Coben, in terms of mysteries, a lot of my books have mysteries in them. And he, I think, does a really good job of taking a normal person and putting them in a situation that is kind of going out of control, and you're watching this person try to figure out how to deal with and what's behind all of the new things they're coming with. So my contemporary mysteries are modeled more closely after that, but Kenai has some of that too. You have this person that's thrust into a situation that's not really their what they signed up for, and are having to deal with hidden information and bad guys running around. So yeah, I like his books. I read a ton of L. Frank Baum's Oz books early on, and I love the kind of whimsy and all of that. Nnedi Okorafor is great. I've gotten into her stuff more recently. and her Akata Witch series reminded me a ton of both Wizard of Oz and also a little bit Harry Potter, but done better, and with an African flavor. So yeah, there are a lot of people that I really kind of borrow from. I read it. I really loved the Edgar Rice Burroughs books, the Mars books, Barsoom. I got into those when I was a kid. I know that he's from an earlier time, and some of the stuff in the books doesn't look so great now, but he could sure tell a story, and just the rich imagination of what a life on a dying Mars would be like is really cool. Heinlein, I read a ton of him too. So I don't know, I could go on all day, but yeah, a lot of folks.
Awesome.
Yeah, really
yeah, a lot of different inspirations. It's all over the place. A lot of what you said, I have not read any of, which is crazy. I've seen the movie Princess Bride. I've seen the movie Conan, but I've not read any of those.
Yeah,
I'm just I'm new on reading, so I've only been reading for past 6 years now. So it's I'm still catching up on the the older books that are out there. I'm trying to get my hands on those when I can go through and find them, to go through and try to really experience some of what inspired a lot of these authors or fellow readers. Like, I've been reading my whole life, so I've read The Hobbit, I've read this. I'm like, I read that a few years ago. So like, I'm way behind on all those.
Well, and I'm probably a little older than most of the folks you talk to. So I'm sure I'm talking about things that were popular before and are a little more kind of out of date now. I've been judging after being in the self-published sci-fi competition a couple times with Daros and Kenai. I'm now a judge for it, and that's been really cool because I'm reading stuff that came out like a year ago by indie authors. So it's totally different from the kind of classics of sci-fi that I grew up on, and just so much creativity. Much more diversity of character and background and voice and all of that. So that's been a lot of fun too, and means I don't just sit there with my, old white dudes kind of sci-fi background, and I'm getting a chance to read some more stuff.
Yeah, it's that's awesome. I thoroughly enjoy the judging, because this is my second cohort of going through and judging for different competitions. It's a lot of fun. You get to experience a lot of stories that have not been on your radar, and that's big for me. I want to find like gems that it's not everyone's talking about. I want to find the up and coming story or up and coming author that's like hasn't hit yet to the mainstream. Those are always a lot of fun to go through. Yes, Mike, the IBOR judges. Mike's a fellow IBOR judge.
Oh yeah, IBOR. That's so neat that they're doing that now that SPFBO is filled up so much. I love that they've got this sort of. I thought of it as kind of the NIT versus the NCAA, in basketball terms, but it's not quite that, because these aren't teams that are like ranked lower. They just didn't happen to get the lottery ticket. So that's not a great analogy, but anyway, I think it's great that there's more of them. I've been in SPSFC twice. I've done the BBNYA a bunch of times, and then all of my fantasy I've put through the SPFBO before, and I got lucky enough to get in to the 10th one with Lady Isovar when they started doing the lottery. But yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Thank you for doing that, because it's it was
awesome. Corey going through and setting that up, because everyone was complaining about it, and then Corey was like, "I'm just going to step up and do it." So he did it quick. He did it fast. Got everything set up. It was everyone trying to figure things out, but we're starting in a few weeks of going through and reading those books, and it's awesome. I think it's gonna continue to grow. Definitely with, how SPFBO set up, where it is a lottery system starting out, which I get it. It's so big, you kind of need to do that. And then this is kind of the second part of it, where it's like, hey, you didn't make the lottery, but here's an opportunity to at least get your name out there, and have people go through and read your books and go through and talk about it. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I just, I'm very excited to be a part of it, to hit it on the ground floor and keep going.
Yeah.
Yes, Ro, I agree with you. Corey is definitely nuts for doing this. Doing it
Yeah.
so quickly. Doing it so quickly and being able to like really hyper focusing on it. So yeah, it's really cool. Love the idea of what he's doing with this.
Yeah. Oh,
and
it's so fun for others. I mean, it's hair tearing, when you're waiting to find out if you made the next cut or not. But it's so fun just to know that somebody's out there, reading your stuff and passing judgment on it and thinking about it. And, you can get some good publicity, even if you wash out earlier. If the judges are careful. Some of the judges are kind of a little harsh in the cuts, but yeah, when I've been judging, I've been trying to highlight, what's good about this book and who's the audience, even if it's not going to continue in our group, because judging is random too. The more of these you do, the more you realize that the books that win are generally good, and the books that don't win, you can sometimes find flaws with, but a lot of it is random and personal taste, and and the luck of the draw and all that kind of thing too.
Yeah, because the first one I did, because you mentioned you did the BBNYA, and I did that also. That was the first one I did this past year, and I read so many good books, so many good books through that experience. And the person who won, obviously is a fantastic writer, but yeah, it's a lot about opinion and perspective of what people really enjoy reading, because I definitely felt the people who was judging, I was like, okay, I could kind of tell where everyone was leaning on the types of stories they like. I'm like, I can kind of guess you're not going to enjoy this body horror book. That's fantastic. Like, it's really good. But y'all ain't gonna like it. So it was like stuff that I went through and read. I was like, I'm gonna really try to push these, because I know they're not gonna get that far in the competition, unfortunately. So yeah, awesome. All right, let's get back to Dave. All right, Dave, I got some questions based on some things you went through and said. So you went through and was talking a little bit about your 11 novels that you went through and wrote in the past 7 years, how you like to go through and take breaks within the stories. You get an idea, you start writing, and you jump to another idea. When it comes to those ideas, do the stories start with like a world? Does it start with a character? Do you have is it centralized against a what if scenario in your head? Where do these ideas come from, where you're like, hey, I need to jump into this as an actual story instead of just being an idea in your head?
Yeah, they all start from slightly different places. Sometimes it's a concept, and I think what the concept is for Kenai, because it becomes central to the story about halfway through. So that was the starting premise, but I had to write like, I don't know, 40% of the book to even get to where it was happening and where Jess was dealing with it. And in the process, I kind of discovered who she was and gave her this backstory with her past troubles and stuff. And so she ended up being the thing I worked on first and hardest, but the concept was the sort of business with what's weird about the planet. In Got Trouble, that was another one where I had kind of a one sentence concept. What if there was an X that does Y, was basically the starting of that one. And again, I could tell you those, but that would kind of spoil the story. In Rolling Lass, I'm like, I want to start with a guy who's in the middle of an assassination attempt. And then the story will be him trying to figure out who's trying to kill him, And so that was the basis of that mystery. For Unwelcome Matt, my most recent mystery, my writing buddy, Sarah, gave me the starting concept. She said, okay, there's somebody who comes home and finds a body in their apartment that they have no idea who is. They just come home and find a dead body, sitting on their couch. And so I wrote the first chapter and sort of expanded on that and, gave her a roommate that might be involved and all that. But yeah, so that was the start. And then because of the way I write, the completely seat of the pants, I don't really know like I had no idea who this dead guy was, and I had to write the story to kind of find out. Yeah, so that's fun. But yeah, a lot of times it's a single concept. With Lady Isovar, it was totally the character. Like I didn't have any of the story figured out. I was just like, I want to write the silliest, most bombastic lady knight I can imagine. And so yeah, just having her voice kind of jump out in the first chapter, and then thinking, okay, and I want her sidekick to be, because he shows up in the first chapter too, but I want him to have a totally different perspective. And so the concept there was the characters and basically their interaction. And the rest of it I just did as I took a course in the medieval court in college that focused on a lot of the stories about knights wandering the countryside having adventures. And so I did that novel kind of in that style. And so they go through, I don't know, 5 or 6 different big adventures and some small ones. And so that was a different sort of pace and type of story for me. There is a central kind of thing that one of them is trying to do and a backstory that gradually comes out, most of which I had kind of thought of at the beginning. But I still develop a lot of it as I go.
Awesome. So I want to take one more step back to something else you said. And then I kind of will start leaning in a little bit into your book, Kenai.
Yeah.
I said it wrong again. All right, here, let's try again. Oh, so you said you go through and sometimes take a break for like 9 months at a time.
Yeah.
But you're a pantser, so you don't write anything down. So do you just have like, are you just good at categorizing things in your head of like, I'm working on this book, but I need a break. I can just push that over here and decide as I'm working on something else. Like, how do you go through and like keep your ideas formatted 9 months later after you're writing a whole different story?
That makes it sound very noble and elegant what I'm doing. And what I'm actually doing is getting completely stuck and realizing that there's something a little wrong or that I don't know what to do next, and then flailing at it for a while, and then saying, I'm not having fun. I don't want to do this anymore. And then when I come back, sometimes I'll have found a way, or it'll just be easier because I'm not as deep into it. And I read what I've done before. Sometimes I have a big sort of revelation, like Outcast Crown, which is my second fantasy detective story. I had set up a kind of dynamic between the main character, who was a higher status guy, and the apprentice he was working with, who was lower status. And their relationship was terrible. And when I read it again, I was like, oh, that's the problem with this. That's why I wasn't making any progress. And so I completely reworked how they relate to each other and what her attitude towards him was. And that helped the book immeasurably kind of go forward. With Daros, I was writing about a girl who's a smuggler's daughter. And she gets caught up in a planetary invasion, has to abandon her dad's ship while her dad tries to land it, even though it's been shot up. And she's alone on a planet that's being currently invaded. And I was like, this is a great premise. This is awesome. And then I hit the problem that she didn't know enough and couldn't possibly find out enough to be a character who was going to matter to the big story of why the planet was being invaded. And so I set that aside. That was when I let go for maybe a year and a half. And when I came back to it, I was like, oh, this needs another perspective. And it would be great if that perspective could know things that the girl would never learn. And so I made the second perspective be somebody in the invading fleet. And so then it turned into a book with 2 POVs, one of whom's in the invader fleet, one of whom is dealing with the invasion on the ground. And then there's another couple characters who enter it. But that really helped that book go. My mystery, What Grows from the Dead, I wrote like 80% of it, and then got to a point where I was having to do the kind of the part of the movie where they spend all of their budget, like the big action sequences and stuff. And I was like, yeah, this is hard. I don't know how this would happen. I don't know if this is a satisfying end to all this. And so I set that one aside for a year and came back to it. I remember that I have all of these pieces. Like I have probably 5 projects now that are partly written, sort of waiting. But I leave them and I don't think much more about them until I'm like, you know what, that was kind of good. Maybe I'll read it again and see what I could do with it. And then often I'll figure out what was screwing me up with it before. It would be much more efficient if I could realize that in the moment rather than having to go off and do something else for a while. But yeah, basically, if I'm following it and it's fun, then I'm pretty confident it's going to at least amuse me and probably be a good book. And if I'm struggling with it, it might still be a good book, but I'm maybe not, and I'm not having as much fun. So, being a hedonist, I will sometimes let things go if I'm not enjoying them. I'm confident that I'll at some point come back and maybe fix them.
So when you're writing and you're working through a story, are you writing for a specific audience members in mind, or you're like, I'm just writing for myself, and if I think it's good, then there's other people out there that enjoy the same things I like?
Yeah, all of my books are the kind of book I would want to read. So I am totally writing for me. I have pretty broad tastes, so there are a lot of genres that I write in because I enjoy lots of different kinds of things. But I'm not going to write probably an anti-hero, or at least somebody who can't redeem themselves, because I really don't like reading about evil people doing evil things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like mafia movies where everybody just sucks. I want somebody to cheer for. So my books are always going to have somebody to cheer for. I like stories where somebody's trying to do the right thing, even though it's hard, so that's a constant theme in mine. So yeah, I am pretty much writing for me and hoping that other people will come along for the ride and get my jokes and, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I feel a little offended right then, to be honest with you, Dave. I feel a little bit offended. I love mafia movies. I feel like
there's so much that grimdark that people love, and I know that, and I respect the hell out of it. But if I'm going to write somebody, I want to write somebody who's not going to do crappy things to other people.
Yeah, I'm just
that's not somebody I'm just like. Yeah, I get it, but it's
one more question about this, and then I do want to lean into your story. I just had a question again. If you could go back and give yourself writing advice, so you're working on your first book and you're struggling a little bit, you hit that first brick wall. Is there any advice Dave now could go through and give Dave from 7+ years ago on writing, or any kind of advice you feel like he should know?
It took me a long time to figure out that I did better when I was writing daily. I tended to write sort of episodically, a few days and then stop, and then maybe the next weekend write a little more. And I do so much better when I'm doing something at least every day. Because what happens is I don't drop out of the headspace of the story. Mm-hmm. Like I may only write for an hour in a day or a couple hours, but the rest of the day I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, that was cool. Why did it happen? Because I don't have an outline. I'm a pantser. I suck. But and I'll be thinking like while I'm washing dishes, what should happen next? How am I going to justify this situation that I've gotten them in? Who are the bad guys really, and what do they want? So I'm doing a lot of sort of processing when I'm eating lunch or playing video games or, trying to go to sleep. And if I take breaks, then I fall out of that kind of mindset where I'm doing work even when I'm not writing. And so that's a thing that it's taken me a while to learn, and that I still fail at sometimes. Because I get lazy or I get distracted, or there's a new PlayStation game that I want to play for 60 hours a week. But yeah, if I want to get writing done, doing it every day, even if it's just a little bit that I can get out, that would have helped me.
So stay in the zone is pretty much what I'm understanding. So you write daily, you sit in that creative flow. You got to stick with that flow. You got to stay in that cadence and constantly go through and think about it. I love it. I think that's fantastic. What video game are you playing? I don't play that much video games. I got very young kids. I just don't have the time. Once they're older, I think I'm going to be able to lean back in. I'm curious, what kind of games you like?
So I play Dota 2, Everyday Defense of the Ancients, which is like a 5-on-5. It's a little bit like League of Legends, if you've heard of that. Yeah, it's a 5-on-5 kind of competitive thing. Lasts about half hour, 45 minutes, and it's basically just fun for me. And it's the same thing over and over again. There's not a plot. You're just trying to get better at understanding the characters and their abilities, and and playing your guy better. And I've been playing that since 2014, pretty much every day. So that's a big one for me. In terms of games with storylines, I'm going through Ghost of Yotei now, the sequel to the earlier Ghost of Tsushima, and that is really fun. I'm a I'm a kind of a dumbass when it comes to that kind of game, because I'm a completionist. And so I will constantly be like, there's this thing on the map, I have to go do whatever that is, even if it's like pick up an extra, headband that is totally optional. I'll be like, I have to go do that. And I get frustrated because I get bored playing that way. And if I would just play the main plot, that's where they put all the story in, that would be much more fun. But I'm over there like, if I do this, I will have a +1 on my, sneak roll or something. And I'm stupid. Yotei is good. I see one of your commenters there saying that. Yeah, I really like the style of it in addition to the gameplay, because they've set it up basically just like a Kurosawa movie. With honor and samurai and gritty people and all this stuff going on. It's really fun.
Yeah, the graphics look amazing. I'm looking at it real quick. It looks crazy good, like crazy good.
When you're there facing off against a guy across the sort of ring from you, and there are cherry blossom petals falling around you, and the wind's blowing by, it's totally cinematic in a way that, when I grew up, Atari 2600 and, 300 by 200 pixels, it's so cool now to see that having progressed so much in my lifetime. So
that's awesome. That's cool. Game. Yeah, can't wait. One of these days, I'm going to be able to go back and have some fun again. Can't wait till my kids they're too young to play video games right now. Like, I'm just got them a handheld video game. It's not a Game Boy, but it's kind of like a Game Boy thing, like the emulated game where it has like 20,000 games on it. So they're playing that, and they're going through and playing the old school Mario, the old school Pokemon games, and they're going through and doing that. So they're playing games that I played growing up, and they're slowly getting into that, and then we'll eventually get them a console, which will be mine as well. Yeah. It'll be fun. It'll be fun stuff. All right. I do want to jump into Kenai, because I really thoroughly enjoyed this story, and I want to get into some non-spoiler items about it. There are specifics, and so if I start getting too spoilery, Dave.
No, it's a book that's very hard to talk about without doing a little bit of spoiling. So as long as we don't,
we'll try to just go one level down and not go too much into the plot. We'll stick mostly with the world, a few characters and things like that. So Jesse is your main character. You mentioned during your introduction a little bit about your book, and Jesse is a formal used to be a Marine, now working in security on this island, on the planet, not island. What drew you to tell this story through Jesse's voice and Jesse's perspective?
I started out writing single perspective books, and then I jumped over into having alternating perspectives and really liked that. But for this one, I really felt like she was the one that could be a good storyteller for everything that I had planned. I wanted to give her the military background, because I was going to really mess with her in terms of what she has to deal with. And I thought that would be fun to have her, fall back on that mindset and those skills in the story. And, basically she doesn't feel like a badass, but she totally is a badass. Mm-hmm. And so having her make that kind of journey back into accepting that she's actually good at what she trained to do, and that it's not bad to be good at that, even though what happened to her before was bad. Mm-hmm. So that I thought would be a really interesting thing to kind of to show in terms of a character journey, while the plot is also going on. So I thought she'd be a good perspective for both that in terms of a character. And I wasn't necessarily going to do, there's some flashback chapters where you go back to her past and see the kinds of things that went right for her and went wrong for her early on. And those are really early, so that's not spoiling anything. Mm-hmm. But as soon as I wrote the first one, I was like, oh, this is neat, because she's existing in two different times in the narrative. And of course that becomes interesting later on in the book when she's also existing in two different times in a different way. And so I kind of thought that was cool that she was finally processing some of the trauma that she had dealt with as new trauma kind of mirrors it. And so, I mean, that sounds very like I was intentional and literary and thoughtful. And it was sort of kind of, oh, that's cool, I'll do that, but anyway, yeah, that to me, that made her the obvious character. I didn't want to reveal more about the world than she was figuring out. That's one thing I really like about the single POV stories, especially in a mystery setting, which this kind of is. She's having to piece it together. There are people who know more than she does, but they are not telling her everything for various reasons. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of, as you're reading, you're figuring it out as she is. And sometimes you're probably faster at it than she is. And sometimes you probably are slower, hopefully, if I've done a good job with her. But that's kind of fun to see her sort of figure it out while you do. Mm-hmm. And figure out what the hell is going on the planet and why there are all these bad guys when there shouldn't be any bad guys, and who these weird other people she's meeting are, and all of that kind of thing. Yeah. Because the planet is not as extinct as was billed. We can say that as a mild spoiler. So she starts to meet some people who have a different kind of interest in Kenai.
Yeah, very interesting. But no, what I do really enjoyed about this book is you mentioned, you are figuring the world out with as the characters are going through and figuring out, but it's not info dumpy. You don't get a bunch of, all right, let me give you the full world background of everything under the sun. You don't drop that. It's slow, it's meaningful how you're going through and giving that background, which I really do appreciate how you went through and did that within the story. Now, when it comes to this planet that she's on and she's going through and figuring everything out, what inspired this fictional world, the culture? Because there's no way you just there's no way, because I know I went through the whole story. There's no way you just magically was just like woke up one day going, oh, this is an idea, and then you just had it all out. There had to be some kind of inspiration for you, because it was really good. I'm trying not to spoil what.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how much you can build off of tiny little things. Because, I wanted to have an alien species that was fairly different from humans. Mm-hmm. And so when she first meets the main representative of the main alien species he's dealing with, he's different from humans. And so she's trying to figure out, what his deal is and how he's functioning and why does he speak her language and where the hell did he come from? So there's that part. And I don't need to have his whole culture when I bring him in, because I can just write the part that you see. And that's the pantser part of it, is as long as I can remember what I've done, I can build the rest as it happens. And so I actually didn't have his whole, I knew the problem that he was dealing with, because that was going to be central to the story. And I had thought of that ahead of time. but I didn't know what his culture was like, how he fit into it, what they valued, what their other struggle was. Because the book is kind of 3 parts, and you meet him just as that second part is starting. And the third part is where he and his culture get better developed. And I didn't know any of that till I got there. That is just how I do it. But it's not some glorious burst of creativity that you were talking about when you were asking me about it. It's kind of just making up crap as I go. And then the thing I have to do when I edit it, after I've done this kind of seat of the pants first draft, is I go back and I add in things that would make for a better storyline, and I take out the stuff that I've added that doesn't make sense or is leading us away from where I wanted the story to go. So but yeah, I started with the central sort of mystery of Kenai. Then I put Jess in, and I developed her for a while in that first part of the story, and then I got into what's weird about Kenai, which was the main idea, and then Elihar's culture just kind of developed as I wrote it afterwards, and then got refined and enriched as I went through multiple drafts from then on. Because once it's written, then you can make it better. It's it's kind of like if you are molding something out of clay, right? You can get it to look like a person pretty fast, but to make it look good takes a long time and a lot of detail work. And so that's kind of what, I don't know, that's sort of a tortured metaphor, but that's sort of like what my books are, is that first draft gives them their shape and the characters and some voices and the events, but making it work and making it flow and making the stuff that happens early relate to the stuff that happens late. All of that is hard. And with Kenai, just because of the nature of what's going on, I did have to stop about halfway through and outline the rules of the planet, and then the stuff that goes on in kind of the third act. I really needed to kind of map out okay, well, if this happened then they would see this, and then that would happen then, and then it gets really, really complicated. So that's actually technically the hardest plot I have ever had to kind of work my way through.
Okay, that's what I meant. That's this. Yeah. The part that I was referencing. I was like, there's no way that you just went through. It was like, oh yeah, I got this. This makes sense. No. That's why I was like, there's no way. Like, I know there had to be some notes down for that structure of the world culture. We'll just say that. That which one of my favorite parts was that avenue of how you went through and set up not only the culture, but also the consequences for it as well. You get kind of what I'm leaning towards. Not spoiling anything. Okay. Loved it. So good. I had too much fun with it, and had me thinking of like the moral dilemma these people had to be going through.
Yeah.
By having this and then also having that consequences as well that potentially happen to them. It's just too much fun with it. That's what really kept me not only going within the story and getting excited, but had me, when I put the book down, had me thinking through things a lot. I'm like, man, what if this, or what about this? And it was just, it was really cool. A lot of fun. I thoroughly enjoy books that keep me thinking when I even put them down. I'm like, all right, well, I'm not done with it, but I put it down, and then I'm like constantly, and I'm thinking, I'm like, how would this work? Okay, how would this work? And then it's just like, it was too much fun. So
well, I'm glad that was your reaction, because some people read it and they're like, oh, come on, that's total BS,
Oh man, I loved it. I had too much fun.
Yeah, but if you accept the kind of really silly premise, then it does open up a whole bunch of really kind of complicated questions and moral issues and sort of ideas about destiny and all kinds of stuff. It's I had a lot of fun going through that and doing that kind of work.
Awesome. All right, so I'm okay, because I was questioning. I was like, there's like, that's crazy if you just thought of all of this, but that makes sense.
I can show you my probably 20 pages of of rules for the planet, and
Yeah.
how the threat at the end manifests, because that's really hard to do in the situation and what sequence of events has to happen. A really interesting thing, it's the only book I've ever had this happen. I got to about 80% of the way through, and I was like, well, now I've got to write this really complicated sort of conclusion to it, and it's going to be really hard. And I almost hit one of my points where I'm going to, put this on the shelf and come back to it in a while. But what I decided to do was, I knew how I wanted it to end. And so I stopped at that 80% mark and wrote the last chapter. And then I was like, well, that worked. What would happen just before that? And so I wrote the second to last chapter. And then I was like, oh, okay, this is going okay. And I wrote the third to last, and I actually worked my way back to 80%, which, if you've read the book, is just really funny that I did it that way. But yeah, so that has never happened to me before, that I've actually kind of written in reverse to get myself back to that point. And that let me do the kind of the big action sort of ending, and what the different characters were going to do with Jess and how she was going to handle all of it. And yeah, there's one moment where she tries something that has a very low chance of success. And there were a whole bunch of people who read it for me and who've talked to me afterwards, who were like, if that actually worked, I was going to throw the book across the room, because like that would have been the cheesiest. And it doesn't work because it shouldn't have worked. And
Right.
yeah. Anyway, so hopefully that's not spoiling anything. But yeah, I tried to have things go wrong as much as they were going right. And
make it more realistic. Make it more instead of having that that armor of, oh, okay, they're going to jump out of this 20-story building and somehow do a barrel roll and then keep running. It didn't. It wasn't a goofy action. It felt real, and it was a lot of fun. Speaking of that, when it came to the themes, I'm a themes person. I am a big fan of like finding themes, even when they're not there. So if I start asking stuff and you're like, it wasn't there, it won't be the first time. So I
will be the happiest author you talk to if you discovered themes that I never meant for there to be in there. That'll be perfect.
I get so embarrassed because I go through and say, hey, did this mean this? And they go, no, that's a great idea, but no, I never thought about it. I'm like, okay, thanks. So for this, I felt within this, there was a lot of themes around Jess and her relationships. There was a reoccurring around trust, around loyalty, and around friendship. And one, I'm curious, was that on purpose? And then if so, what did you want to explore about human connections in this difficult environment? So one, did you on purpose make those themes of relationships with Jess and the people that surrounded her first? Let's start there.
Yeah. I totally wanted to do that. So that one I will cop to. That was a big part of her character. And without going through all of it, like she has a relationship that doesn't work out through no fault of her own, except for the circumstances they were in. Then she has this scientist she's working with, and she has a pretty good relationship with him, but that shifts a little bit. And then she has Elihar, who she's discovered, and he seems like a good guy, but he's kind of lying to her also. So she's constantly running into people who are not quite what they present themselves to be, or who are hiding something significant, or who are actively betraying her. And because of her background, because she really comes into the book, she was perfectly competent soldier. She got in trouble. She got punished for things that were, not her fault, but were things that she did, And so that's another kind of theme is, by the end, I didn't totally know how much guilt she should feel, or even how much she was actually trying to feel about the kind of thing that got her in trouble. Because you could take that a bunch of different ways. You could be like total, like I got screwed by the system, or you could be like I did some bad stuff, and it is ambiguous, and I liked having that in there. But the other thing with her is eventually she starts to trust people again and like people, and to hear advice that was given to her a long time ago that she wasn't really ready to hear when it was being said, so that was also part of the thing that the flashbacks gave me access to. And I'm talking about, I mean, you probably know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I also felt there was a big, and you mentioned this, so I know this, I know I was right on this, where it's about duty, responsibility was another big theme that I went through and noticed that she was going through within this story. So it was awesome. I'm glad I got some themes correct that I was going through and seeing there, and not just putting in my own personal thoughts into it, which is always fun. Awesome. Well,
she breaks down duty in her head at one key point. She talks about like you're supposed to follow orders if you're in an organization, and so that's one reason to do things, but you might get bad orders. She goes through like this hierarchy of who she's doing stuff for, and realizes that she's finally found people that she can do stuff for because they deserve her help, as opposed to because she's being sent there or ordered to, or, like I thought I tried to make that kind of one of the emotional moments of the book.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
All right. I want to kind of pivot away from the story, because I am just constantly thinking about spoiler related items. I'm going to ask you a few once we get off. There's a few specifics that I have.
Did you see my flow chart in the back in the author's notes? I don't know if you kept going in there, but you can see one example of the notes I was keeping. It's for the middle section of the book where it's the most complex.
I need to go through and be honest. No, I did not see that.
Yeah. So that'll tell you a lot about how stupid my process was. Figuring out, but yeah, there's a flow chart in there that that I actually used to make sure I was getting everything in the right place.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, I need to. I have it here, so I'm downloading it again on my phone, and I'm gonna go through and look at it real quick.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious now if you've thought about if you could go through and adapt your story into a different type of medium. Have you thought about, hey, this would be an amazing video game? Would this be an amazing film, a series, a graphic novel? Have you gone through and thought, had that fantasy thought about for Kenai?
Yeah. So one of my dreams has always been to have one of my books turned into a movie or a TV show. And I think Kenai would be hard to do as a movie because you'd have to leave out a lot. I don't think there's anything about the story that doesn't lend itself to the screen. If you had a good enough actor, or maybe if you could do some voiceover to get some of her thoughts, because there are big stretches where she's not talking to anybody. But yeah, I think Kenai would work either as a movie or maybe one of these limited series they're doing with everything. I say like that's ever going to happen, but yeah, no, I tend to write what I hope is cinematically, for things that have enough action and visuals and sort of discussions. I love dialogue, so a lot of my folks are talking to each other, and so I try to write them in a way that feels like movies too. And I find that keeps me away from the sort of info dumpy part. A lot of times I'll have characters think stuff. My wife is my first editor, and she will often tell me, "You're doing it again" in the margins of my books, where I have people thinking too hard about what to do next, because that's me thinking about what they should do next. And I write it in the book so that I can evaluate, but I leave too much of it in. But yeah, that stuff wouldn't make good movie. In my other books, I would love to see those. Like, I feel like the fantasy detective stories would be a great sort of maybe even multi-season kind of thing. If you were following this Inquisitors Guild and you could see different characters they're making shows like that now. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Lady Isobar is a lot like The Tick in some ways. So that one would work animated if you had big enough actors, because The Tick is big and uncontrolled and full of himself, and Lady Isobar is that way a little bit too. So that's probably the one that would be the most cartoon friendly. I don't know if it would work as a comic book or not, but it might. She says everything she's thinking out loud, so you wouldn't have to do too many thought bubbles for her. Yeah, and then my mysteries, I think each of them could be a movie with a little bit of work. I've thought about, my son went to film school, NYU, and he does a lot of script writing. And I've talked to him about maybe trying to write a movie script for some of my contemporary mysteries. And again, I'm sure that would go nowhere, and it would just be like an exercise for me. But it would be kind of fun to see if what I suspect would work as a movie would actually turn into something that would be 2 hours and make sense.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
No, that's too cool. That's too cool. I think that it would be a fun exercise of going through and like, okay, how can I condense this down but still have that same like impact as you would a full story. All right. So you mentioned at the beginning, I think you said you're working currently on 5. You have 5 different novels going through in your head right now?
Working on 5. I am working on 0. No, I'm working on 1. Okay. Yeah, the one that I'm doing now, I'm actually doing with my my writing buddy. She's a former professor also at the same college. We worked together for a lot of years. And we both kind of left Guilford at about the same time. And we've both started writing books since we left as kind of a thing to, keep us busy and do something fun. She writes romance novels, and she hasn't published any yet, but she's gotten an agent to market her stuff. And I've read her romance novels as she's gone. She will not usually read my fantasy or sci-fi, but she'll read my mysteries. And so we've, been each other's kind of first readers or giving each other advice, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And she had the idea last year of, why don't we try to write one together? And she loves romance. So it's a romance novel. I've never written a romance novel before, but in this one, she wrote the perspective of a female professor at this small liberal arts college that has nothing to do with the one where we were. And I wrote the perspective of a male professor there. And we alternate chapters, and they start out basically hating each other, finding each other both, totally insufferable, and they've hated each other for like 8 years, and they end up having to work together on this thing that gets dumped in their laps, which is a little bit of a mystery because somebody might be doing something shady. And so they end up kind of seeing each other in a different light and starting to realize they don't suck as much as they thought. And teamwork makes the dream work, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But that's been super fun to kind of have something where I'm only writing half of it, and I'm getting a whole bunch of information from her, and then writing my own chapter. The fun thing about that is that she is a total outline person. She doesn't outline to the point where like I know every action that's going to happen in every chapter, but she very much wanted to know what are going to be the main story beats. How are we going to explain this? What's the mystery going to do? And how are they going to, end up together? And what are some funny things that we can write as we go? And so, yeah, writing with her has been good practice at writing with an outline and with a structure, and in a totally different genre, which is a lot of fun. It's not very steamy, so I didn't have to write a whole bunch of, flesh and sweat and all of that kind of thing. But yeah. So yeah, that's been just a blast. We hope to have that out maybe pretty soon. We're going to run it by her agent and see if the agent wants to take it on. But otherwise, we'll probably put it out indie like my other stuff. And so yes, I am writing in way too many genres according to what they tell you to do, because like my also bought books on Amazon are all over the place, because I have people who read my mysteries and want more mysteries, and they get fed my sci-fi stuff. And yeah. So the smart people say you should do pseudonyms for everything, and keep it all,
all these different names out there. So when it comes to, so you've written mystery, you've written fantasy, sci-fi, now romance.
Yeah.
Is there other genres you're thinking about leaning into, or are you thinking about, hey, trying out
What, like a Western?
Western? That's what I was thinking of. Because I was like, first, I was like, maybe you wouldn't want to do like horror. That doesn't seem like up your avenue. You don't seem like you would want to do the. You said no for anti-hero, but yeah, Western. Have you thought about doing like a Western or a children's book? I don't know. Just go.
I have a children's book out. That one's traditionally published from '96. It's not a endangered species. So.
Oh, well, there we go.
Yeah, I got that out of the way early. One of the several projects I've made a little bit of progress on is a sort of magical realism thing. It's set in the present day with just one sort of aspect of the world turned over into magic and fantasy. And I actually was inspired to do that after we did the first draft of the romance novel, because I was like, well, this is kind of fun writing this different way. What if I could write one that was not like, Twilight, sparkly vampires, werewolves falling in love with people and stuff, but just like one kind of, because I like movies like that where there's like one unexplained or weird or mystical thing in the world and people are kind of dealing with it. A whole bunch of really funny comedies that way. Like Click with Adam Sandler, where the remote controls his life, so like that kind of thing where there's one weird thing. And so that might be a genre I try, but it's hard. Writing contemporary stuff is actually in some ways harder than fantasy and sci-fi because you have to get things right. Because if it's fantasy or sci-fi, you can just decide how stuff works. But if you're writing in the real world and you say, her cell phone wouldn't connect with the tower, there's going to be somebody who's like, no, that's not how cell phones work, or that's not police procedure, or the gun laws in that state wouldn't allow, and so you have to have so much more knowledge and advice and research to get it right in the real world than you do in a fantasy book. I still look up stuff for fantasy, like what do they sew up wounds with in 1300, and that kind of thing. But you can also just say, well, that's the way it works in my world.
Because how does it work? Because it works. That's so
you try to avoid that, but you can kind of design it so that what you want to happen in the plot works. Whereas if your plot is hinging on what would a sheriff's response to a particular confrontation with the suspect be, and you do something that would be completely against procedure or illegal, then you're screwed and you have to completely redo it. Or if you assert that you can detect cars speed by radar from this distance and it doesn't work, then somebody's going to be like, oh, well, that's not. And so you end up with all these kind of issues. With the sci-fi, I have an astrophysics professor friend who I get him to read all the sci-fi stuff and tell me if there's something. A lot of my science in the sci-fi, we read Kenai, this, is total bullshit and it would never work that way. And so I try to get him to focus on the things that I want to sound realistic as opposed to the things that I know that I'm making up. And he's really helpful with that. So I do have some research that way. But yeah, I guess I could do a Western. I don't know. I tend to write what I read, and I tend to write a mystery into everything. Like if there's one unifying thing with all the books is that there are mysteries involved. And so whatever I do, there'd be probably some element of mystery to it. But yeah, we'll see if I can do a slightly paranormal magical realism thing. That would be fun.
Would be cool.
Yeah.
Would be very cool. Yeah. All right. Well, so last thing, Dave, for those that are watching either live or on the replay, and this is the first time hearing about you and your work, and they're on the fence to go through and give your books a try. I want to give you one more selling point to go through and try to sell them on any of your books, but or Kenai. I've personally read that one, so I know a lot about that one. But any of your books, just go through and give one more selling point to why they should go through and give you and your stories a try.
Okay. With Kenai, the biggest sort of external validation is that it won the third SPSFC competition, which is like SPIFPO we were talking about earlier. And so it was the one that won out of 221 entries over the course of a year of judging. So that was one moment where I felt like I had pulled myself up from being sort of, I'm a writer, posery sort of imposter syndrome stuff to like, hey, I actually did something that people liked. So that one has that big piece of sort of validation. But if I was really trying to recruit somebody based on the merits, I would say that if you like stories with characters who are forced into situations where they have to work hard to do the right thing and to keep bad things from happening to other people, that's the kind of story I love to read, and that's the kind of story I love to write. And so you'll have a character with a good heart and a whole bunch of challenges, kind of winging it as they go along to try to make something out of something that's gone really badly wrong. And so that's, yeah. You asked about authors before. Dick Francis writes a whole bunch of stories, or wrote before he died. And actually his wife wrote most of them that came out. But he wrote a bunch of stories with that kind of character who's, gets beat up, gets abused, gets hurt, and still kind of tries to figure out how to do what's right and how to get back at the people that are trying to hurt other folks. So yeah, I guess that's a very incoherent version of my elevator pitch, is that if you like people trying hard to do good things, that's my books. That's all of them.
Awesome. Well, Dave, I really do appreciate you being on and going through and talking with
this
me
was great.
today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it was
and for reading Kenai. I'm glad you had some fun with it.
Yeah, I had too much fun. So thank you again. Thank you, everyone who was with us during the live. Appreciate all of you jumping on, and anyone who's watching the recap. Thank you so much. And I hope everyone have a fantastic evening, and make sure to stay overbooked. I appreciate everyone. Thank you very much. I'll see you in the next one. All right.
Thanks a lot.